I turned 29 last month, and as I approach 30, I've been reflecting back on my 20s, and I got a couple of things right, but I got a lot of things wrong. And so today I wanted to walk through all of the things I now know at 29 that would have gotten me here way faster if I had just known them earlier. And so by the end of this video, you're gonna have 4 valuable jewels that if you apply to your own life, I guarantee will allow you to achieve your goals much faster and much easier. 1, get positive cash flow as fast as possible, okay? You need to get positive cash flow as fast as possible because positive cash flow is what allows you to reinvest and, more importantly, just level up in general, right? Rapid progress comes from reinvesting in yourself. Everyone knows the story of Elon Musk, right? Who has gotten to their goals faster, more audacious goals faster than Elon Musk? Probably no one in recent history. And so Elon is known for famously taking all the proceeds from PayPal that he made in his first venture and reinvesting all of it back into new ventures. There's even this mythology that he was like couch surfing on his friends' places when he was worth like $100 million because he plunged all the money back into new ventures. He couldn't afford his own rent. Now, the biggest adversary in this process is keeping up and spending for status reasons, right? It detracts from your ability to reinvest in yourself. You're gonna look back one day and you're gonna regret how much faster you could have achieved your dreams, but you opted for some dumb, fleeting pleasures instead. For me, I had the unique advantages, but also disadvantages of going through my 20s with some ludicrously successful friends. And as we were all kind of on the come up together, their progress was starting to accelerate faster than mine. And I didn't really want to admit that. And so I started funneling little by little more and more of my free cash flow into keeping up with them. And I was so convinced, right, that for me, that massive success they were having was just around the corner. It was inevitable for me. So it was worth kind of keeping up the impressions because I was gonna be there soon anyways. But what I didn't realize was that the act of keeping up actually moved me backwards in the opposite direction. People who go exponential, like Elon Musk or my friends, they reinvest everything. And people who don't reinvest everything move backwards in relation to those people. Now, I remember early on in my career, my first ever breakthrough, I got on an absolute heater in business. I got lucky a few times over. I got a bunch of opportunities. I started closing a lot of new clients. Cash was coming in. And you know what I did? I went out and I bought like a sick watch and a BMW because that's what my friends were doing who were more successful. And the problem is, I then went through a subsequent difficult period where business wasn't as great and I didn't feel as on top of the world. And that was torture. That was way more pain than the pleasure of getting those things I wanted because I remember thinking, I have this car and I have this watch and I have no money. There's more money on my wrist than in my corporate bank account. Like, who am I? Who have I become? And so I often say this with clients, right? Cash flow problems arise. This financial stress in general arises when our ego exceeds our income. If you think you're deserving of more financial freedom and splurging in the present than you really are, you'll never balance a budget, never mind reinvest to get ahead. Later on in my career, I had another one of these total breakthroughs, and I'll talk more about that later in this video. But in retrospect, this new breakthrough I had came from a specific mentor whose time I had to pay for. And the time I paid for that led to that breakthrough cost about the same amount as that watch I bought in my early 20s. And if I had been in the right frame of mind at that time to start thinking and researching where would be the best reinvestment of that money, I would probably have gotten to where I am now at 29 at 25. None of this is even to mention the primary benefit of free cash flow, right? Once you've accumulated what seems like a lot at the time, once you've accumulated a lot of investments, once you have a lot of free cash flow, you start to become completely freed up to take risks. And for me, when I was more freed up, I would go into meetings with less attachment to the outcome, which would end up getting more clients and making my existing clients happier. And I would take a risk that might cost me $5,000 or $10,000 to test because it didn't matter if it flopped. It wouldn't impact my financial future that much. And so the idea of feeling freed up to take risks, freed up to reinvest in myself, even if it wasn't guaranteed, was absolutely the number one thing for my progress. Invest in the markets. Invest in yourself. Invest in something other than vanity and consumption, regardless of how bad you want it. Because in this process, the wheels in your head will naturally start turning. You have this freed up feeling, you have this abundance of capital, and you have this to reinvest. You'll start to do the work to determine where's the highest ROI on this investment, on this capital. And as you start to sort through more and more of those options, more and more of those things, you're gonna find out what you need to do to get to that next level and where you need to invest. And so do this, or you'll end up just like me. 2, just because something isn't scalable doesn't mean it's not your next best step, okay? Listen to me, just because something isn't scalable doesn't mean it's not your next best step. What do I mean by that? I went through my 20s, like I said in the earlier example, right? Seeing people around me having big success, mind-blowing success. This led me to believe that everything I needed to do and everything I had to do had to have 100x returns on the money or the time or the effort I put in order for it to be worth pursuing. Some of my most successful friends were building profitable software companies or high-scale marketing businesses, and they would have these super high leverage plays where they could build a software once and attract millions of users, and they could hire out all the work that they didn't want to do. And I saw them putting in very low amounts of input to get massive amounts of output. And I thought that must be the way to success. And I was surrounded by these ideas of leverage. You guys have all heard the Naval Ravikant stuff probably, right? If you want to truly get wealthy, you need to disconnect your income and your economic value and how you get paid from your time, right? No one ever builds wealth or success trading their time away for money. I fell into this trap of only being attracted to things that were scalable, which isn't always a problem, but I fell into it way too early. I paid for platforms that would automate more of my work at the expense of profits and the ability to reinvest. I pursued avenues of business and marketing that were always one-to-many, like creating YouTube content or podcasting, for instance, rather than putting in the unscalable work up front, like the targeted one-to-one outreach, taking more phone calls, going on more one-to-one meetings, things that by definition aren't high leverage, but would have just gotten me more momentum in the beginning. And so I ended up 5 years later having a business that gave me an insane amount of freedom and time, but no money, relatively speaking. What I should have done is just fill my calendar with as many opportunities as I could, regardless of how scalable they were. I should have just got momentum first, and then got so much momentum that I was so busy that I needed to get leverage to get my time back. So the lesson here is do the unscalable work. Do it to get that initial burst, and do this until you're tapped out. Then, once you're busy, then you can go and implement leverage to get your time back. And so just because something doesn't get you 100x return on your time or your money or your effort, just because it's unscalable does not mean it's not your next best move. Next is limiting beliefs. Now, I understand it's cliche, but I wanna make this practical, right? The biggest limitation isn't your weaknesses, it's not the economy, it's not your industry, it's not your age, it's not your headwinds, it's not your upbringing, it's not your lack of capital or time. It's the fact that you have these little blind spots, these little holes in your belief system that you just can't see. You're completely oblivious to them. As you're sitting there watching this video, and as I'm sitting here filming it, there are limiting beliefs standing right in front of our noses, things that are holding us back from where we want to go. And the terrifying thing is that we all have 3 or 4 of them and we don't know what they are. We have no idea. And if we only knew what they were, we could be where we want to be in a matter of months instead of years. Here's what I mean. I had a limiting belief that prospective clients wanted the lowest friction, lowest cost way to hire me. I had been growing a business and operating under that belief system for like 8 or 9 years when I was given the idea to experiment with something. What if we added way more value up front and therefore also charged way more up front? Listen for a second. We grew our top line revenue by 40% in 3 months. I worked 8 years to get from point A to point B, and then I got 40% further than point B in 3 months just by eliminating a limiting belief in my mind that people didn't want to pay for my stuff. Now, the really painful part is to tie this back into our previous idea about reinvesting in yourself or in your business. If I had filled this blind spot 5 years ago and we had been able to grow 40% 5 years ago, not only would I have increased the business by 40% 5 years ago, I would have had 2 to 3 times the money to reinvest 5 years ago to get me further ahead by now. Reinvest in the business, reinvest in the markets, reinvest in my self-development. I grew up in a house where money always felt tight, right? We were constantly looking at prices. I was brought up in a frugal household, and this led me to believe that people will always price check you. They will always walk away if the price seems too high. No one wants to pay for your stuff. Everyone is trying to hoard their cash. Everyone's being meticulous with their money. And this led me to being very intimidated asking anyone for money, even if I was providing disproportionate value. I wouldn't be myself around older clients because of how much money they had. And because of how much money they had, they were probably ultra protective of that money. And I was terrified that their rejection would be a sign that I wasn't someone worth spending on. But listen to this. This is really interesting. As my personal wealth grew, I realized I don't feel that much different about my money and the complexity and the challenges around that money as I did a decade ago when there were 3 or 4 less zeros. Everything is the same, but now there's just more zeros, and I'm way more comfortable paying people to solve my problems. Wait a second. I love paying people to solve my problems. I love paying professionals to do things for me. If I love paying for results, why wouldn't someone else love paying me to get results? This was a mind-shattering realization. Now when I get in front of a big prospect, I'm thrilled because to me, $1 million is less than $100,000. That makes no sense, Josh. How does that make sense? Because when you have $1 million, you're more freed up to hire people out and to take risks. When you have $100,000, you need to pinch every penny because you need all of that potential. It's this weird paradox that hit me that, wait a second, more money is actually less intimidating and less money is more intimidating. This changed everything for me. People that are senior to me don't have it figured out, and bigger numbers aren't scary. And I can relate to them now, and I can show them that I've had a similar experience that they've had, and I want to share this experience with them, the one that I had. The one that the most fulfilling use of money is the money that you spend to get yourself to the next level. That limiting belief that the people I wanted to work with didn't think my stuff was valuable or didn't want my stuff was incredibly restricting. Do you see how counterproductive these beliefs can be and how blind we can be to them? So how do you find out what these limiting beliefs are if they're blind by nature? Well, I think as you get older and wealthier, you will naturally find them, but you can figure them out way faster. And the best way I've found to do that, find someone who's 3 to 4 steps ahead on the same journey you're on and pay them for their time. Buy their program, pay for a phone call. It doesn't matter how much it costs. What's costing you more is the blind spot that you have. And this is what I started to do. And this is something that's always been worth its weight in gold and something that I'm gonna bring into the next phase of my life. Now, number 4, burnout doesn't mean you're overworked. It means what you're working on isn't working. I went through a period in my early 20s where I was running full bore at my goals. I would work 10 hours a day, then I would create content for 2 hours, then I would volunteer and network for 2 to 4 hours, and then I would crash at night and get up and repeat. And I did this for years. Things were slowly building momentum. I was getting more clients, I was making more money, I was building more productive relationships, and I could see the progress and results that were happening. Sure, I felt tired. Of course, I felt tired at the end of every day, but I felt energized in the grand scheme, right? Then, in my late 20s, I went through a similar period where I was in the same frame of mind. I was busting my butt. I was creating content. I was working every day. I was running meetings. I was doing networking. I was taking calls for no reward. All of these low leverage things. But this time around, we had some big internal challenges within our business where our platform, where we house all our clients' investments and all that underpinning of our business, was spun off and we were forced to transition to a different platform. This was a complete disaster. It was a miserable experience for us and for our clients because the lines of communication were so broken between all these different parties that were getting involved. Essentially what happened was we ended up taking the blame for every little thing that was not our fault for a long period of time. And we didn't point fingers, we just ate it. And it was all hands on deck to keep the ship afloat while we were taking bullets for a year. Now, I don't think I was working harder in this period than I was in my early 20s, but this time I felt completely burned out. I was so disconnected from my work that work became an afterthought in my day. Now, meanwhile, all my friends and clients are crushing it, and so I feel even worse. It's hard times, right? And I probably spent 12 to 18 months living this miserable life. And so I just golfed and traveled and mailed in any ambitions I had for my business. And I diagnosed this whole thing as burnout. I had just been working too hard. And it ended up being 12 to 18 months walking through life, just waiting to grow by getting lucky, which we did from time to time. But then I eventually came across an advertisement for a firm that specialized in financial advisor, customer experiences, and marketing. And I clicked it. And everything I was hearing was like relaying back to me my exact same problems. And they helped me realize that I was just stuck. Like I needed new ideas, I needed new mentorship, and I needed a new path forward because what I was doing wasn't working. I ended up pursuing this, and it completely turned my business around. I realized I was just locked in this box of self-pity and self-diagnosed burnout. And I learned through like the juxtapositions of these two phases of my life, when what you're doing is working, it's impossible to feel burned out. The work itself is self-energizing. You can work full tilt for years and not get tired. But burnout is what happens when you're working nonstop and you're not getting anywhere. You're running on a treadmill and you're losing ground. And so what I've learned is that if you ever feel burnout or one of these burnout plateaus, it just means you need a new guide. It doesn't mean you need to relax. You need a new circle of ideas. You need a new path forward. You need a new frame. And the best way, once again, that I've found to do this is find someone who's 3 to 4 steps ahead on your journey and pay them for your time. Pay them to unlock some idea. Pay them to bring you to that next place. I've now realized that being ambitious and doing nothing about it is substantially more exhausting than chasing your ambitions full tilt all day, every day with the right guidance. So as I turned 29 last week and moved towards 30, these are some of the big things I now know at 29 that I just wish I knew way earlier, and that would have gotten me here way faster. And hopefully these 4 lessons have been valuable to you and you can apply them within your own life to get to where you want to go much faster. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.